President heads to the United Nations building at the invitation of the Chinese President Xi Jinping to participate in a meeting on cooperation between South Asian states. Before wrapping up his U.S. visit, Sisi is scheduled to hold separate meetings with the presidents of Uruguay and Serbia to discuss bilateral relations. The head of state is finally expected to hold an interview with the Associated Press on the ongoing developments in Egypt, the upcoming parliamentary elections and the situation in Libya, Syria and Iraq. President Sisi met with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in to discuss bilateral relations. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Ali Youssef said that Sisi discussed with Merkel Egypt's third and final stage of its roadmap to democracy with the upcoming parliamentary elections. He stressed that there must be a political solution to a host of challenges facing the Middle East in order to preserve the integrity and unity of those countries. Merkel, for her part, welcomed Egypt's steady steps towards accomplishing the final stage of its roadmap and holding the parliamentary elections. The German Chancellor said she agrees with the Egyptian vision on the need to confront terrorism. Sisi also met with Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, and they discussed bilateral relations and several regional and international issues of mutual concern. He also held talks with the Croatian President and the Prime Ministers of India and Ireland. The discussions tackled bilateral ties between those countries. The ministry said that 2 soldiers had been killed by a roadside car bomb in northern Sinai. In a statement, the ministry said that 16 other soldiers were injured in the explosion in the city of Arish. The ministry added that the car was parked on the side of the road and exploded when the soldiers' vehicle was passing by. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Interior announced the death of 9 terrorists in a security raid on militant hideouts in the Giza Governorate. In a statement, the ministry said that 3 militants wore explosive belts, adding that the forces seized ammunition and explosives, as well as a number of unregistered vehicles. The statement noted that 3 police officers and conscripts were injured during the exchange of fire with the gunmen. The ministry revealed the terrorists were plotting to launch attacks during the Eid al-Adha holiday. It added that gunmen were involved in 2 attacks that targeted the state security building in the Qalyubiyya, as well as the Italian consulate in Cairo earlier this year. Ministry of Interior announced the death of 9 terrorists in a security raid on militant hideouts in the Giza Governorate. In a statement, the ministry said that 3 militants wore explosive belts, adding that the forces seized ammunition and explosives, as well as a number of unregistered vehicles. Statement noted that 3 police officers and conscripts were injured in the exchange. Moving on to regional news, the death toll from a stampede during the annual Hajj has risen to 769 people, according to the health minister. Khaled Al-Faleh also told reporters that the number of injured has risen to 934. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia deployed large numbers of special forces Saturday as pilgrims performed the final rituals of a Hajj marred by double tragedies that have killed more than 800 people. Dozens of special emergency force personnel were seen on one level of the Jamarat Bridge, a 5-story structure in Mina where pilgrims ritually stoned the devil, and on which hundreds of thousands were converging when a deadly stampede occurred nearby on Thursday. Many more special forces patrolled the network of roads leading to the structure, which resembles a parking garage. The tightened measures came after 769 people died outside the bridge in the worst tragedy to strike the annual Muslim pilgrimage in a quarter-century. Iran, meanwhile, urged Saudi Arabia on Saturday to locate more than 340 of its nationals still missing in the aftermath of the deadly stampede at the annual Hajj pilgrimage. So far, 136 Iranians are known to have been killed and 102 injured, according to the head of Iran's Hajj organization, Saeed Ohadi, in the worst tragedy in a quarter-century at the pilgrimage to Islam's holiest sites in western Saudi Arabia. Ohadi, quoted on state television, said 344 Iranians were still unaccounted for 2 days after the disaster. Culture Minister Ali Jannati is to head a delegation to Saudi Arabia to follow up on the cases of those missing and injured in Thursday's stampede. He will also oversee the repatriation of those killed to take place on Monday, according to local media. Saudi Arabia says heavy cross-border fire from Yemen Shiite rebels has killed a senior border guard commander and a soldier. 4 other soldiers were also injured. Such cross-border firing and shelling have been common since the Saudi-led coalition began a campaign of airstrikes in March against Yemen's Shiite rebels known as the Houthis. We have the details in this report. A senior Saudi officer and another border guard were killed in a gun battle after a landmine blast along the border with Yemen. Saudi Interior Ministry said in a statement on Saturday that Colonel Hassan Ghassoum Ghili and a deputy sergeant died late Friday in the Jazan district, and 4 other guards were lightly wounded. Ghili is one of the most senior Saudi officers killed since March, when the kingdom formed an Arab coalition to fight the Shiite Houthi rebels in Yemen. The landmine blast damaged vehicles patrolling the border district. After backup arrived, they were subject to heavy shooting from several locations inside the Yemeni border. Riyadh launched airstrikes against the Houthis 6 months ago to support the internationally backed government of Yemeni President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, and was losing ground. Saudi Arabia feared the Houthis would take over all of Yemen and move its neighbor into the orbit of the Sunni kingdom's Shiite regional rival Iran. But the region had lost territory since late July, when the coalition began deploying ground troops in support of local forces. Meanwhile, airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition targeting Yemen's Shiite rebels continued on Saturday, a day after strikes and fighting on the ground killed at least 13 people. Buildings hit included locations belonging to the military police and residences belonging to former Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Moscow pressured its military build-up at a new airbase area on Saturday. The recent deployment of its own troops and warplanes to Syria, combined with new armed deliveries to Al-Assad's armed forces, appear to have prompted a significant shift in international efforts to end the conflict. Saturday was the 15th straight day that Russian transport aircraft had flown in troops and equipment to the Hmeimim base in Latakia province on the Mediterranean coast. U.S. satellites have recorded increased activity by Russian forces at the base inside the Bashar al-Assad civil and military airport. Washington and NATO say that recent spotting of helicopters, bombers, ground attack aircraft, tanks and soldiers prove that Russia is building an airbase in Latakia. Pentagon said that Russian military aircraft have conducted flights over Syria but not yet launched any strikes. The U.S. has said it could find areas of cooperation with Russia if Moscow were to join the fight against the Daesh terrorist group. The European Union's diplomatic chief and Iran's foreign minister met Saturday in New York to discuss the war in Syria ahead of a UN push for peace talks. Iran has been kept out of UN diplomatic efforts to end the 4-year war that has killed more than 240,000 people. An EU statement said EU diplomatic chief Federica Mogherini and the Iranian foreign minister Mohammad Javad Zarif readiness to cooperate within UN-led efforts to end the Syrian crisis. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is also due to meet with Zarif on Saturday in New York, as is Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Monday. The UN peace talks led to envoy Stefan de Mistura would be coupled with the creation of an international contact group that would be, for the first time, include Iran, but Saudi Arabia still opposes the plan. A flurry of meetings on the sidelines of this year's UN General Assembly meeting will seek to forge a new consensus on the way forward in Syria. U.S. President Barack Obama will sit down with Russian leader Vladimir Putin on Monday for talks that could prove crucial in charting the way forward. The United States has a $500 million program to train and equip moderates recruited from amongst the rebels fighting al-Assad's forces, but it has faced repeated setbacks. In a shock admission on Friday, the Pentagon said that a group of U.S.-trained rebels had handed over ammunition and equipment to al-Qaeda's Syria affiliate, the al-Nusra Front, purportedly in exchange for safe passage. We have the details. The Pentagon on Friday said a group of U.S.-trained Syrian rebels had handed over ammunition and equipment to al-Qaeda's affiliate in the country, the al-Nusra Front, purportedly in exchange for safe passage. The startling acknowledgement contrasted with earlier Pentagon denials that some fighters had either defected or handed over gear. Colonel Patrick Ryder, a spokesman for the Central Command, which is overseeing efforts against the Daesh group in Iraq and Syria, said the fighters had handed over the gear in exchange for safe passage in the al-Nusra operating area. Ryder added the pickup vehicles and ammunition represented about 25% of the equipment issued to the group by the U.S.-led coalition. Defense officials said that according to the rebels, there had not been any defections. The development is another embarrassing setback for the U.S. efforts to train and equip moderate Syrian rebels to fight Daesh terrorists in Syria. The $500 million program originally aimed to ready around 5,400 vetted fighters a year for 3 years, but has problems finding suitable candidates have seen only getting trained. The first graduates, who made up a group of 54 fighters, were attacked by Nusra in July, and the Pentagon isn't sure what happened to them all. However, at least one was killed. Lebanon's Shiite movement Hezbollah confirmed that a 6-month truce had been reached for the rebel-held town of Zabadani and 2 Shiite towns in the northwest. Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah said the deal was reached under United Nations auspices with the mediation of Iran. It will entail the evacuation of armed and wounded from Zabadani between Damascus and the Lebanese border to Idlib province in the north, in exchange for the evacuation of 10,000 civilians from the villages of Fouet and